Hi, I'm Melissa Tolakai, founder of Nature's Apothecary and the host of The Natural Path on Bold Brave TV. One of the most common questions my clients pose me with is, what are the symptoms of perimenopause? How do I know I'm going through this change of life? Well, let's take a step back and look at the foundation of that. Perimenopause itself is this transitional phase between being fertile, having regular periods, our reproductive years if you like, and then menopause and postmenopause itself, where we have not had a period for 12 months. So during this time, things can go a little crazy. Our hormones, primarily estrogen and progesterone, are going to drive the symptoms. They're not the only ones, but they're the main ones. Estrogen can take an absolute roller coaster ride through this time. So there will be days where your estrogen is extremely high and others where it can bottom out. And this can fluctuate for years. So it's not a case of a simple downward trend of estrogen. It really can be quite erratic. Whereas progesterone tends to take a more steady decline and is much more predictable in how it behaves. So let's take a look at some of those symptoms that you can expect. You won't most likely experience all of them, but it's good to know what they are so that you can be aware of what's going on and then be proactive in your own health to manage them. Irregular periods, that makes perfect sense, that while you're going through these changes, your periods can be very erratic. Now, some women may experience a 28 to 30 day cycle for most of this time, but while the cycle length may stay the same for some, the actual length of your period itself can vary quite considerably. So it could be 2 days and very light, or on the other extreme, it could be 5 to 7 days, sometimes more, and very, very heavy bleeding, which we call flooding. And that one can be really debilitating, because when that's happening, we may not want to leave the house because we're just not sure, if we're going to get caught out with this heavy bleeding going on and feel quite self-conscious. So be aware that it can change. Your actual period itself can be very erratic in how it behaves, and that is a normal thing. So don't be frightened by it, but if you are concerned, of course, get a checkup with your doctor. Now, some women will experience a dramatic change in the length of their cycle overall. They could have very short months where it's, say, 2 to 3 weeks, and other months you might skip a month and then it's back. So there is no set expectation of what's going to go on with the length there. It really is very different for every woman. For myself, the actual cycle length has stayed really, really consistent, but the actual periods themselves have been quite irregular in their behavior. Another thing that so many women complain about, and for really good reason, is fatigue. And we're not talking about the normal sort of fatigue where you take a rest and it's gone and everything feels better. This can be absolutely bone-crushing fatigue that makes it hard to function. I mean, how do you think clearly when you're exhausted and you just can't seem to find your get up and go again? And there are many, many factors behind this. It's not just the change in the estrogen and progesterone levels. The brain during this time actually doesn't make energy as efficiently for clear thinking. This is a temporary thing that does pass after you become postmenopausal, typically 2 to 3 years later. But so many women also have sleep irregularities, and they're waking up through the night, especially if you're experiencing hot flashes or night sweats, as they come on during the night, they will wake you up, and they can come on many times during the night. So naturally, if you're waking so frequently, you're going to be very, very tired. So this is a time to really look after yourself and nurture yourself with good food, self-care to help you with that fatigue. And do take note that a lot of these symptoms can also be common with other conditions, particularly thyroid health. And I see this a lot because this is a really big danger time for you to develop a thyroid condition. Most of my clients that have thyroid conditions, they do come on during this perimenopausal stage because of the instability of the immune system. And what are the symptoms of a low thyroid? Fatigue, absolute crushing fatigue, brain fog, hair loss, mood swings, feeling depressed. Each and every one of those symptoms is also a symptom of perimenopause. So it is really, really important, if you're going through these, to get your thyroid checked, to tease out, is it just my thyroid? Is it just my hormones? Or is it both of them having a party together and making life really uncomfortable for me? Because then you're in a position to do something about it. And then you're in the power seat. So as I mentioned with the fatigue, we've got the insomnia and the frequent waking through the night. And sometimes that will feel like it's for no reason at all, that you're waking up at 3 in the morning and the mind's buzzing. And you're just not getting that deep sleep that you might have got previously. So very, very common. Hair loss is also another one that many women experience, and not just up here on our heads, but our eyebrows. Many women will have their eyebrows thinning out, and you know that can really affect our self-esteem, particularly if you have fine hair in the first place and all of a sudden it's coming out in your hairbrush and you're going, hang on a minute, where's my hair going? There is good news. There are things we can do about that naturally too, so stay tuned for other videos about that. The hot flushes and the night sweats are probably some of the most talked about or well-known symptoms, and they relate to the drop in estrogen. Now, before your period is when you'll go through a big estrogen crash, so to speak, as it drops and progesterone rises in order to menstruate. And the actual hot flush and night sweat is a sign of the estrogen drop. So you may find that you're not having them all the time, but simply just before your period. And as you get further and further along through perimenopause, they can become more frequent as estrogen starts to stay lower. Now, some people call them hot flashes. Be aware, they are not gone in a flash. They can go on for not just minutes, but hours. So I think flush is a better word than a flash, because it's just not a quick thing, and can be very uncomfortable, and often accompanied at night by the sweats. So you will wake up dripping wet, feeling like you need to change the sheets because everything is soaked, and then you will go from hot to cold. The changes in estrogen are actually affecting your brain. In particular, a part of your brain called the hypothalamus, which actually regulates your body temperature. And we have this normal range of what the body says, okay, between here and here is normal for me, and anything else I'm either too hot or too cold. As estrogen starts to get lower, whether it's just before your period or you're getting later on in that perimenopausal phase, what happens is this range starts to shrink, which is not fun, because all of a sudden what was normal to you is suddenly too hot or too cold. So you're either heating up and sweating, or you're getting chills because you've had the sweats and now you're cold again. So it is normal. There is lots you can do about it naturally. I take herbs for mine, and they work so quick. It's an absolute game changer, especially for sleeping at night, when you've gone from hot flushes and sweats to herbs that can actually relieve that, and all of a sudden you're sleeping again because you're comfortable. Still feeling warm, but not that intense I'm on fire. You feel generally warmer overall all the time. That's really normal, but it will regulate that intensity that we go through that is just so uncomfortable. Another thing we have is what's called genitourinary syndrome. So these changes are affecting our urinary system. Estrogen is a hormone that says to the tissues, be thick, be lush, and it keeps them really healthy and moist. And as we start to lose it, they become drier and more fragile. So we can feel like we're getting more infections, whether it's bladder infections or, sorry, there's a fly floating around in here. So urinary infections, urinary tract infections, or bladder infections. Sometimes it's not an infection at all, it's just irritation because the lining has become so thin and sensitive. And other times it can be an infection because with that thinness of the lining, it's easier for the bacteria to stick to it and proliferate and cause that infective state. Along with that comes drying and thinning of the vaginal tissues, so they become incredibly fragile, so intercourse and intimacy can become very uncomfortable, and you can experience tearing and pain and itching and burning. It does not mean you have thrush necessarily, but it's this dryness and fragility which is causing all these really very uncomfortable symptoms. But there are natural lubricants you can use. There are supplements you can use to actually help with that without having to go down the path of hormone replacement. Really is personal preference for every woman. Prolapse of the uterus, the bladder, and the rectum become more common at this time because we've lost that strengthening power of estrogen as we get to those later stages. So you can be very proactive in that and use special exercises and breathing techniques to help strengthen the surrounding muscles that hold those in place and help actually help reverse it in many cases, depending how far you're along. So pelvic floor health is very, very important at this time for you. The mood swings, oh my gosh. This is really common, and women can feel like they're suddenly going crazy and they don't know what to do, and that they don't feel like themselves anymore. And please let me reassure you, this is a very normal and common experience. And it's both progesterone and estrogen that cause this. The loss of progesterone has an effect on serotonin, one of our happy hormones. So we can become more prone to low moods. And as progesterone drops, we need progesterone to help us produce GABA, which is one of our calming neurotransmitters and makes us feel chill and relaxed. And all of a sudden it's gone, and women can experience panic attacks for the very first time in their life and think, oh my gosh, what the heck's going on? What's happening to me? So to know that these things are a possibility and to be aware so that if it happens, it's not so alarming and distressing for you, and to know that there are plenty of things you can do, whether you choose the natural path or the medical path or a combination of both. You have lots of tools that you can use to help you overcome these. but it's great to be aware that these are things that do happen, and you're not suddenly going crazy, but your hormones are shifting and causing this. Weight gain. Hello. It's like goodbye waistline for a lot of us. Some women are just going to breeze through this with a minimum of symptoms, and you know, I wish I was one of them, but I'm like most women, and I watched my waistline disappear, and boy, is that distressing. And you're thinking, well, gee, I'm not eating any differently. I'm still exercising. I'm doing the same things. Why is my weight changing? What's happening to me? I don't understand. This is the loss of estrogen again. It causes us to become less sensitive to insulin. So we aren't burning up those sugars effectively, and they're being converted into fat. And it becomes a whole lot harder to shift it. So the things that might have worked for you in the past all of a sudden aren't working. And we tend to become more of an apple shape, where we're putting the weight around our middles rather than our hips and thighs. So that's one of the giveaway signs that our sensitivity to insulin has been altered. Again, there are plenty of things you can do, but the first thing is to be aware that it's going on and that you haven't done something wrong all of a sudden. It is a natural shift in your hormones, and it means taking a different approach. At the same time, our cortisol can become quite elevated, and cortisol also causes us to store fat. It promotes it. Cortisol is one of our stress hormones, and if perimenopause doesn't bring on stress, I don't know what does. So be aware of those things. Interestingly, our fat tissue actually can produce a weaker form of estrogen called E1 or estrone. Our active form is estradiol. That's what our ovaries produce. But the fat cells can actually produce some weaker estrogen. So I have to wonder whether that is the body's way of trying to compensate for a loss of estradiol, and help try to overcome some of these effects that we feel. Our adrenals also take over some of the estrogen production as well. So it doesn't disappear totally, but it does decline, especially at that very end. And we have a new baseline, which is really the levels we had before we hit puberty. So it's like going through puberty in reverse. The brain fog and memory loss that many women experience is very common. There's been a lot of research into this, and it's believed to be that we are not making energy as effectively or as efficiently as we used to in the brain, and that is affecting our thought processes. It's not that we suddenly become stupid, but our brain is going through a rewiring process, and I find it affects the short-term memory the most. I think you'll find your long-term memory will be quite clear, but that short-term memory of, why did I walk into the room? What was I coming in here for? That goes on a lot. So just know that most women will feel that, and about 2 years postmenopausally, that will actually, in most cases, resolve itself. So we do come back from that, which is the great news. Loss of libido, another very common experience. And let's think about it. We've got not only those changes in the hormones, but also in our body itself. We might be putting on weight, which is affecting our confidence. We've got those symptoms within the vaginal tissues of it thinning and be fragile, and intimacy being painful. Of course, that is going to affect your libido, and to be on top of that, have your moods going all over the place and be exhausted. I mean, who would feel like being intimate? It's very, very challenging. So again, this is a time for critical self-care, self-love, and there are certainly natural things you can do to help boost your libido, but first take care of your body so that you're not in that pain. As I said, there are remedies can help with the irritation, and natural things to help lubricate and protect those vulnerable tissues so that it's not such a distressing time for you. Another one that women commonly experience is itchy skin. Commonly the scalp too, or all over at night time, and that is due to a rise in histamine that goes on, and our immune system becoming quite erratic and unstable at this time. So you haven't suddenly caught some deadly disease. That itching is quite normal, and you can manage it naturally with things like quercetin and vitamin C, which are natural antihistamines, to help reduce that and even get rid of it totally. So these are some of the things you can expect to go through in perimenopause. Like I said, you won't go through every single one of them, but it's great to know what to look out for so that you can be proactive. Not be alarmed when it happens, and take next steps. So please stay tuned, subscribe, and in future videos I'll be talking a lot more about these things in greater detail to give you some support as you go through this process. So in the comments, I would love to hear what your experiences are and what things would help you. So stay tuned. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.